Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. My name is Mike Green from Dr. Demographics. Today we're going to talk about the big city exodus. That's a name that I came up with because of some things we're seeing, some trends we're seeing over the last 10 years. Well, not 10 years, really since COVID. So for the last 5 years, with some big cities losing out to smaller cities. Want to thank you for joining us today. Again, we're on video, so if you're listening to this in your car or just through audio, number one, thank you for listening to us. We so appreciate you. But you might want to follow along on the video as well. We have a presentation that we do that follows along with the podcast. You may find that helpful, especially with topics like this, when you're trying to define the perfect place to put a practice and learning about opportunities and challenges that might exist in different places of the country. Let me first introduce myself for those of you that are here for the first time. My name is Mike Green. I own Dr. Demographics. We've been in business for 30 plus years. It was founded in 1983 by Scott McDonald. Probably a lot of you weren't even alive yet, but he founded it. He was working for the California Dental Association and founded Dr. Demographics. I've been in the business of marketing and sales for the last 20 years. And then 10 years ago, I joined Scott here at Dr. Demographics. And over that time, we've done over 10,000 market studies for doctors all over the country. Whether you're in dental or veterinary and optometry, we have seen or virtually walked every road, it feels like, in this country, and I'm sure we can help you as well. First of all, I want to thank you so much for listening. We're now 300 plus episodes. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for coming up to us at conferences and whatnot and letting us know that you've heard the podcast. It means a lot. We've been doing this for a long time. It does take a lot of time to put these together, and it's gratifying when we hear that feedback from you. You can find all those 300 plus episodes by searching on the Apple Podcast or Spotify, or you can go to our website, drdemographics.com/podcast, and you can find them there as well. I also want to thank you for you dentists out there that have supported my new book, Dental Marketing Mastery. That's available on Amazon, Kindle, and softcover version. Working on the audio version right now. Will be released soon, hopefully, if we can get through all the red tape at Amazon. All right, let's talk about the big city exodus. And I'm going to do my best to not squeak my chair too much. I'm actually out of town. I'm at a library today in the world's most uncomfortable chair. And I forgot my glasses. So you have to bear with me a little bit today, but we're going to get through this and talk about this big city exodus. So these are some trends that we're seeing over certainly the last 5 years, especially post-COVID. So practices that were in areas that were shut down during COVID that the city government or the state government said, hey, you can't be in business during this time. And we're not here to debate whether that was the right choice or wrong choice. Well, I'll leave that up to you and your own political parties and that kind of thing. But we do know that we're in business to make money. And so when you can't open, you can't make money. And so that put a lot of doctors and practice owners in hard positions. And because of that, now that we're a few years past the craziness, they're now looking at other opportunities across the country. Because they don't want to be put in that area again. And it's not just businesses, certainly not just professional practices. That's happening with patients as well. A lot of them are moving either to the suburbs or to a completely different state, either because of remote work or otherwise. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. As we get into it. So let's talk specifically about COVID and what we call the COVID catalyst. So specifically 2020, 2021, there was some really strict urban shutdowns that, they just hit practices really, really hard during that time. And that's tough. That's tough to handle for a lot of practice owners because they were in a position where they were already vulnerable because the economy was shaky. And then to have to be shut down for an extended period of time became a real challenge for some of those practices. And at the same time, they were hit with some high rents, obviously reduced foot traffic, delayed patient visits that just messed everything up. And that actually bled over into your staff as well. Sometimes they had staff that felt one way or another about a particular approach that the practice was having, and so they weren't coming into work. And so it created a kind of a perfect storm for practices that were trying to be survive during that time, let alone be profitable during that time. So now, again, as we're a couple years later, it prompted just a true reevaluation of the practice location. I'm surprised how often we have doctors that call and they say, hey, you know what? My lease is up and we survived the COVID era, but I don't want to be vulnerable like that again in the future. And so I just want to possibly consider some other states, other areas that are still going to be really viable for me to be a practice owner, but maybe I'm going to be in areas that are a little bit more business friendly as far as the government goes. And we've talked about that. I think in the last 6 weeks, the last 6 episodes, we've talked about the importance of being in an area where the government, the local government, is glad you're there and not fighting against you. And so that definitely played into a lot of these phone calls that we received and a lot of these trends that we're seeing with practices going to different areas. And so the other side of that, beyond the regulations, was just the patient migration. And that also drives change because a lot of patients said, hey, I don't want to be in an urban area anymore. I didn't feel safe, or I don't like to be around so many people, or I have an opportunity to work remotely that my company gave me, and so I don't have to live right in the city anymore. And so now they're saying, hey, you know what, we can move to the suburbs at least and be away from the craziness and enjoy the suburb lifestyle, or even in some cases the rural lifestyle. And when the patients start moving out, the doctors will follow, the practices will follow. And so that's certainly an opportunity as well for those doctors that are staying really up on their demographics and what's happening. Just like the animal kingdom, the predators follow the food. And not saying that you doctors are predators, you're awesome people, but you got to follow where your food is. You got to follow where your patients are. And if your patients are moving out or to areas that are booming, that weren't booming before, you at least need to take notice and make sure that your practice strategy and your location strategy is following that. So let's talk about one really specific example. And I know that we have a lot of dentists that listen to this podcast, but I want to talk to others out there as well. I don't want you to feel excluded, but let me give you a dentistry example, something very specific. We have seen really since 2022 a pretty strong migration from New York City to North Atlanta. And they're doing that for a lot of different reasons. They're doing that because the rent is on average 20 to 50% cheaper in that area. That's an area that has a ton of families that are moving into it. Atlanta's a very business-friendly area, and so there are a lot of businesses and corporations and whatnot are building in that area, and that's creating a saturation gap between the competition and or the providers and the people that live there. And what that means is that you have more people moving in than the practices can open. And so what we saw in those couple of years, and it slowed down a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's as strong today as what it was even a year ago, but a lot of those practices were just going to an open field, an open market, because the development had happened at such a pace that they could now really open a practice there and be successful without too much work. Some of these doctors saw a 25% patient volume increase in the first year because they chose correctly in the location. So that's one example of in the dentistry world where we saw that happen at a pretty consistent rate. Like of all of the conversations that I had with doctors, that was the most consistent was doctors from New York City wanting to move to other areas. And no shade to New York City. I love New York City. A lot of you doctors that work and practice there do a fantastic job. And you would never, ever, ever consider leaving New York City. And that's awesome. And New York will always be New York, and it will always be thriving. But for those of you that are possibly in a situation where you want to, maybe you're done with that lifestyle or you want to move on, I think it created an opportunity for you to be able to do so. So other specialties really followed suit. We saw the same trends in veterinary and optometry. Same thing. The urban space constraints specifically forced them out to suburban areas. The demand was in the outskirt areas. And so as those subdivisions were built, as those planned developments were going up, it just increased the opportunity for veterinarians, for optometrists. And it was a situation where the demand was really high, but the overhead was lower than what it was in urban areas. And the other thing that was really interesting during COVID's that is kind of an anomaly was that because people were forced to stay at home, a lot of people got pets. A lot of people got dogs or cats or a bird or whatever. And so pet ownership during that time went up by 6%, which is a significant number. It doesn't sound like a huge number, but it is a significant number. And so that was great news for vets. And what was happening with all the kids? They were home on their devices, and so vision care demand also went up because screen time went up dramatically for kids and adults and everybody. And so that was those are two pretty significant factors that played a role in that particular time. So where are the trends? So the 2025 to 2026 trends. Here's why the exodus is going to continue and was not, or we think it's going to continue and was not just isolated to those few years after COVID. One of the things is cost savings. It's still very expensive in an urban area, $50 to $100 per square foot that you're going to save when going from a urban area to suburban areas. Not everywhere, but those opportunities are definitely there. People perceive the quality of life to be much better, less crowded, shorter commutes, a lot of those things that they enjoyed about city life they can find in the suburbs. And there's always going to be people that want to live in the urban areas. They want the nightlife, they want that fast-paced moving. But there's a larger percentage of people that we're seeing than ever before that have gone from that urban area wanting to move out to the suburbs to be able to get a few of those different benefits. And the other thing is that there's a demographic shift. Young families, retirees are not staying in that area, especially for retirees. The COVID time forced a lot of people into retirement earlier than what they were expecting or what they were planning on. And so we saw a bump in retirees, and a lot of them decided, hey, I don't want to necessarily move across the country. I still got family or kids in school or whatever it is, kids in college anyways. And so they've just gone out to the suburbs. And so it's a great opportunity especially for doctors that are focusing on young families and retirees. So, of course, when we're talking about moving, we have to look at the costs, and you have to really weigh the advantages and disadvantages of moving. And so, excuse me. So we recommend, when you're looking at an area that you're considering moving to, you want to have at least a 10%, if not a 20% profitability boost, and be able to prove that is going to be the case when you go to that area, because you have access to more people, or you have a better service, or you're further away from competition. All of those things have to be in place, the best that you can estimate anyways, to get at least a 10 to 20% profitability boost. Otherwise, it just takes too long for you to pay off the costs when you move. You may want to consider going to a more underserved area. And again, that's what North Atlanta was. There was a lot of doctors there, of course, but there was even a bigger number that of people that were moving in. And so a lot of those areas became underserved, meaning that people were having to drive further than what they wanted to be able to get their services, their dental services or veterinary services or whatever. And so the other cool thing about moving to the suburbs is that you get an opportunity to do some really targeted marketing. You move to some of these smaller towns, local SEO becomes really, really powerful. And that's a topic for another day. We won't go too deep into it, but it does create opportunities in the digital marketing space that you didn't have before. And it gives you an opportunity to really invest in the local community when you do that. So if you are going to consider a move, let me suggest that you go through a process. And the first one should be you start with a demographic study. We have a couple of different reports. Typically, we do a best sites report for doctors that are looking to move into an area because that gives us excuse me. That gives us an opportunity to do a true apples to apples comparison on the area you're considering and maybe find some others that you didn't know were certainly viable, that you can see them, up against each other, so to speak, so that you can make a good decision and make sure that you are making the right decision if you are going to go to the expense of moving. And obviously you want to target high growth areas. That growth number, while we've talked many, many times in the past that you shouldn't put too much weight on that growth number, when you move, it does become extremely important. And so you want to move to areas that have a high population growth because you want to find those underserved populations. And so when you look at places like Texas with a 1.6% growth rate or Florida with a 1.1% growth rate, those are states that are really wise for you to look at when it comes to relocation because of the growth that's happening in those two states and the growth that we expect to happen through 2026. You want to budget for the transition. Usually just, you can be anywhere from 50 to 150 to up to 300,000 just in the transition, depending on how fancy you're going to go, how much you have to build, how much you have to transition. If it's possible to test it with a satellite office in some of these locations before you completely pull up stakes, obviously that's ideal, but that is not something that can always happen. So how can we help? How can Dr. Demographics help you make a good decision if you're considering moving from one location to another? I would say we have 3 reports that are really specific for doctors in those situations. Our Best Sites report, the one I just talked about, where you can look at up to 5 counties, and we come back to you with our top 5 areas that we feel like are the most viable for the type of practice that you want to build. If you have a location, very specific location that you're looking at, a building, an address specific, a site viability report is definitely what you want to do. It goes very, very deep in the demographics and psychographics of that location, not only the contiguous zip codes, but also the 5, 10, and 15-minute drive time around it. Or maybe you're really early in the process and you just have some questions. And if that's the case, then I'd point you towards our telephone consultation where you and I can jump on the call together and spend some time going through the data, answering questions, making sure that you're off on the right path. So how do you find that stuff? You go to drdemographics.com or give us a call at 844-704-0499 or shoot us an email at support@drdemographics.com. So again, thank you so much for joining us today and for this big city exodus. Certainly not happening in every big city, but could possibly be happening to yours. So if you'd like to talk about that a little bit further, reach out to us. Happy to do it. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode.